The urge to touch him was almost overwhelming. Her fingers danced around his collar, down his sternum, up his thigh. His muscles tensed under her hands. She felt every heartbeat in the hollows of his throat. But she knew better than to cross that line. She had glimpsed the fire in his eyes, the kind of fire that wouldn't be satisfied by anything so fleeting as her touch. Benjamin Franklin was 61 years old when he first saw the 23-year-old at the Paris salon. Electricity crackled between them, the unspoken tension vibrating in the candlelight. She was the daughter of a silk merchant, he the most celebrated American in France. Soon, their paths intertwined daily. They walked the manicured gardens of Versailles, losing themselves in discussion. He, the seasoned statesman. She, the eager debutante. And always there was that energy between them, charged with potential, waiting for the right conduit. Then, one night it happened. As they sat alone in his chambers, the air thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and unspoken desires, she touched him. He stiffened at first, surprised by the audacity, then overwhelmed by the yearning in her eyes. But just as quickly, he pulled away. He knew where such passion could lead, not just for him, but for her. She was young, impressionable. He was old enough to be her father. But in that moment, he saw the abyss of loneliness in her eyes, the hunger for more than the life her family had planned for her. And he saw, too, the abyss within himself, a vast emptiness carved by years of solitude, a wound he'd tried to ignore, burying himself in work, in wit, in the adulation of crowds. In the quiet aftermath, he felt her tears on his hand, the ghost of her touch lingering like a brand. But he also felt something else, a stirring in his soul that hadn't been there before, a hesitant hope for something more. Yet he was a man of science, of reason, and he knew that what they shared was as fleeting as the candle flame, as fragile as the dawn. So he poured his energy into his work, into diplomacy, into the very fabric of a new nation, building a world where such tender betrayals wouldn't just be forgotten, but might even be forgiven. What did he know about love, or lust, or the longings that drive men to desperate measures? After all, he had dedicated his life to public service, to the betterment of mankind, hadn't he? Sure, but that didn't mean he wasn't capable of monstrous acts himself. Let's just say he was the architect of his own desires. He carefully constructed walls, erected barricades of propriety and decorum. He was a man of principles, after all, but even the sturdiest walls can crumble. When desire takes hold, even the most principled men can fall. He was Franklin, but he could also be anyone. Anyone with a beating heart, with a past that haunts them still, with the taste of longing on their lips. It's time to rewrite history, because here's a secret. Your textbooks forgot to mention. Our founding fathers weren't saints. They were men. Men with ambitions, insecurities, and appetites. They craved power, influence, pleasure. Some were driven by an insatiable lust that knew no bounds. When Thomas Jefferson penned those immortal words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," he had just bought a new house. It was a grand estate with high ceilings and many rooms, perfect for entertaining. But it lacked one thing: privacy. Gossip spread like wildfire in those days, and Jefferson knew that his personal affairs were none of his neighbor's business. So he did what any reasonable man would do. He put up walls. Not just any walls, mind you, but walls with panels that slid silently into place, creating private chambers within his home. He called them his sliding secrets. And for a while they worked. People still whispered. But now they only spoke of Jefferson's eccentric habits, not his private pleasures. But secrets have a way of seeping out, don't they? Years later, when Jefferson was president, a reporter from the National Gazette decided to dig a little deeper into the president's unusual behavior. He sent his best reporter, James T. Callender, to Monticello to uncover the truth. What Callender found shocked him. He discovered a series of secret passages and hidden rooms that Jefferson used for trysts with young men. Suddenly, rumors turned into a scandal. Callender published his findings, hoping to make a name for himself, but he had underestimated Jefferson's reach. The president used his influence to have Callender arrested for slander, and so the whispers died down, at least for a while. Still, they say that every time the wind blows through Monticello, it carries with it the echoes of long-ago trysts, a reminder that even the greatest leaders are just men. Secrets and lies. That's all there is in this world. Washington, the stoic general, the marble-carved president. He too had his share of deceptions. But why bother talking about George? He's just a dull, distant figurehead. Our story is about the ones who truly held the strings of power, who whispered in the shadows and made the wheels turn. People like Alexander Hamilton, the man who practically invented the U.S. Treasury, the architect of the federal financial system, the founding father who single-handedly steered the fledgling nation towards stability. Behind that image of an austere, brilliant mind, there's a side of Hamilton history has conveniently forgotten. Meet the man who loved to live large, who partied hard, who knew how to enjoy the finer things in life. This isn't some salacious gossip. It's a peek into the life of a man whose contributions went beyond balancing budgets. It's about understanding the complexity of the man who shaped America's financial destiny while indulging in the very pleasures he helped create. He wrote about virtue. He spoke of wisdom, restraint, and the value of a quiet life. But in private, Benjamin Franklin pursued desire like a scientist hunting electricity, not with shame, but with precision. When he traveled to France, they called him the philosopher-lover. He was older, heavier, slower than the French elites, but they adored him, not for his looks, but for his appetite. Behind the parlor games and ink-stained speeches, Franklin moved through Parisian salons with a different kind of ambition. He wasn't looking for allies. He was looking for muses, courtesans, widows, even daughters. He wrote letters so passionate, so playful, that they read like love poems, and sometimes like coded invitations. Some were published, most were not. He praised the wisdom of older women while betting girls decades his junior. He joined secret societies. One of them, the Hellfire Club, met in candlelit caves beneath English estates. Members wore robes. They read from blasphemous texts. They drank wine from skulls. And they worshipped what they called the sacred whore. Franklin's name appears in their records. So do initials that match his closest friends and mistresses. In private journals recovered from a French archive, Franklin writes of testing the body like a conductor tests current, seeking where resistance lives. It's unclear if these writings were scientific metaphors or something else. Some scholars say it was poetry, others say it was method. He kept a list, a detailed log of experiments with women of different ages, classes, even languages. Some say he was studying intimacy across culture. Others say he was indulging without conscience. At his home in Philadelphia, there were secret compartments in the walls, letters, lingerie, perfume bottles never seen by guests or family, and in a locked drawer, now empty, a single silver key. What it opened, no one knows. Franklin believed that pleasure could be a form of power. That charm was more disarming than a musket. He once wrote, "A man is not truly free unless his desires obey only him." In the salons of Paris, this made him a legend. In the taverns of London, a warning. In the archives of history, a ghost that smiles through gritted teeth. His statue stands tall outside the university he founded. Students pass it every day, unaware. They honor his genius, his wit, his science. But the truth remains beneath the surface. In ink, in flesh, in firelight. Benjamin Franklin gave America the language of freedom. But in his world, freedom meant something else entirely. Not liberty for all, but liberty to take, to seduce, to conquer without sword or flag. And so we move from the salons of Paris to the hills of Virginia, where another founding father built a kingdom of ideals, on land soaked in silence and secrets. Thomas Jefferson was a revolutionary. That much is certain. The mystery is what he took from the past and what he buried there. From the shores of Monticello, he changed the world. But what did he hide? Beneath the manicured gardens, the grand estate, and the legacy of liberty, there are shadows cast by Jefferson. Secrets lie beneath his mansion, but we will find them. We will search the hidden places and follow the buried clues. We will uncover the silences and bring you the truth behind the legend of Thomas Jefferson. Coming soon. See you then. This is a story about George Washington. He led the Continental Army. He presided over the Constitutional Convention. He was the first president of the United States. He was also a tyrant. At least that's what some historians have called him. And they point to one place above all others, this one place called Little Canada. It was here that George Washington tested his power. It was here that he broke the law. It was here that he punished people without trial or punishment. It was here that he made an example of people without mercy. Today, there is a visitor center where you can learn about the history of this place. But the building itself sits empty, and that's because George Washington destroyed it. In 1799, he set fire to this very spot, burning down the jail, the barracks, and the houses of some of his officers. And the reason he did this is pretty chilling. He wanted to erase the evidence of what happened here. In the summer of 1799, George Washington died. 3 months later, a reporter for the National Gazette published a story about conditions at Little Canada. And according to the reporter, prisoners were treated horribly. They were tortured physically and mentally. Some went insane, some died, some simply disappeared. And the reporter said that he had proof, eyewitness testimony from a former guard. But the paper never printed the testimony. Why? Well, before it could be published, George Washington came to see the editor. According to one account, he looked like a man who had swallowed a red-hot musket ball, eyes flashing, face red with anger. He demanded to know the source of the story. When the editor refused to say, Washington had him arrested. He threw him in jail and sent troops to seize the printing press. And then he did something incredible. Instead of bringing the soldiers back to base, he led them himself on a tour of his property. He pointed out places of interest, like the old jail and the barracks, and then he had the whole thing burned to the ground. And if you think that sounds unbelievable, well, you should know that there are records of it. George Washington kept detailed accounts of his expenses, even for the burning of Little Canada. He wrote, "Paid Major Van Horn $30 for a quantity of gunpowder and $400 for the loss of arms and accoutrements by the accidental firing of a red-hot musket ball." And so despite what happened here, despite all the suffering, today there is little evidence of it. The buildings are gone. The records are sealed, and the only stories that remain are the ones that the powerful would like you to forget. But before we move on, if you're enjoying this series, please do us a favor and subscribe. There are thousands of historical tales like these, stories about powerful people doing terrible things, covering up and trying to rewrite history to make themselves look better. And now, more than ever, those stories are important to tell. Because whether it's presidents or prime ministers, dictators or kings, the powerful often want to hide their mistakes. They want to erase the evidence, and if we let them, they will rewrite the past. And then we won't learn anything. I'm the host. This series is part of our expanded slate of original content. To watch more, check out the series playlist. He was the first, the general, the father of the nation, carved in stone, printed on every dollar. Silent, stoic, untouchable. But George Washington, too, had 2 lives. On the battlefield, he demanded discipline, marching men through frozen rivers, bleeding in silence, leading without flinching. He believed in order, control, obedience, and at Mount Vernon, those same values took on a darker shape. More than 300 slaves served at his estate. Records show they were rotated, shifted, reassigned, not always by labor but by mood. He wrote little of his personal life, but those around him whispered often. There was a barn tucked beyond the gardens known among the enslaved as the Red House. Some were summoned there for punishment, others for reasons never spoken aloud. When Martha Washington burned his letters, hundreds of them, she claimed it was for privacy, but others believe it was erasure, a final act of control, to preserve an image and destroy a truth. His journals describe punishments in detail. The lash applied with care, 3 strikes to correct the spirit, but one page, torn and smudged with what looked like blood, simply reads, "He wept. I did not." Some historians call him cold, others calculated. But a very few, believe Washington was hiding not emotion, but something else entirely. Not absence of passion, but a version of it, never meant for daylight. He kept a personal room, locked from servants. Inside, 3 chairs, a whip, and a mirror. It was never entered by guests, never photographed, never listed in the inventory of the estate. One letter, never sent and unsigned, was found in the attic after his death. It reads, "In war I conquered men. In peace I mastered their sons." Some believe it was a fake. Others think it was a confession. No one can say for certain. George Washington died with a sword by his side. But no child of his name ever appeared. No mistress revealed, no scandal surfaced. Just silence. And yet, in the records of the enslaved, the whispers continue. Of bruises unexplained, of orders delivered with eyes that never blinked, of screams heard beneath the music of formal dinners. They called him the father of the country. But fatherhood comes in many forms, some gentle, some cruel, some unspeakable. His monument reaches to the sky. His name is sacred, but monuments cast long shadows, and sometimes it's in those shadows that the true story waits. Thank you for watching. Go to our website to find us on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe to get more of our fact-driven, unbiased coverage.